Mike Niziolek from the Bloomington Herald-Times joining us now, and he's got a piece out in regards to Curt Cignetti and Indiana football and the spring game coming up on April 18th. It's not that far away, peeps, just barely over 2 months. But some recent changes, Mike, has got to have Indiana football fans really juiced, because Indiana will have the first 2 non-con games, which, while there has been a transition in coaches, you still expect win in those games. Then they have to go to Los Angeles to play UCLA at the Rose Bowl, which seemed a little more daunting, but now they have a coaching change, and they were obviously a good team last year, but not a superior team. And so now the thought has to be, can Indiana, even though we don't know what Indiana is going to be like, but could they potentially go to Los Angeles, win that game, come back, beat Charlotte, and be 4-0 to start the season, 2 games shy of bowl eligibility?
Yeah, I mean, their schedule looks slightly less imposing than it did. I mean, you talk about that UCLA matchup. Obviously, they were going to be kind of rebuilding a little bit, and now without Chip, I mean, it looks a lot different. Maryland's going to be in the market, obviously for a new quarterback, and looking a lot different than they were last year. And Washington's now gone through, significant upheaval. So, I mean, I think you're looking at a schedule that has a lot of winnable games. And obviously, that there's still that daunting now, again, Michigan, Ohio State back-to-back late in the season. But, I mean, your goal is to get bowl eligibility. Curt Cignetti obviously wants to continue that streak. And I think the schedule sets up nicely, even more so than a couple months ago when you looked at it just on the face of kind of what teams went through with, coaching changes themselves and roster upheaval.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting. The thing is, we don't know what they're going to be like, because it is, you want to talk about a new team, man, it is new. It's going to be everything new defense, new offense, new quarterback, new style, especially I think the tempo is really going to get people, because you got to practice fast to be fast has been the mantra. Indiana is going to look to put teams on their heels, and I get that. Indiana has to do something different when you're not quite as deep as some of the teams that they'll be playing. And man, I don't want to set expectations unreasonably high, because it's dumb when you don't know what they're going to be like. But just on paper, it looks like it could be a successful season in year 1 for Curt Cignetti.
Well, I think you can have expectations, because Curt Cignetti said we're going to win, right? I mean,
there's that. He went. That's right. And if not, Google it.
Right. Google him. Not to the level of necessarily competing for a Big Ten title, but I think having a winning season is what he said is sort of the minimum expectation level. So, I mean, you start there. I think, like you said, there are certainly question marks across the roster in terms of what this team will look like. I think offensively, he's done a really nice job in terms of talent acquisition, plus bringing back, the top guys that were in the portal. When you talk about, McCulley, Carter Smith. And so, I think you're loaded there, and you've added some talent. I think they added to the depth of the offensive line. I still think defensively, they're going to struggle a little bit. I don't think they focused on as much on, they've brought in some guys, brought in some James Madison guys, and obviously look to Old Dominion for help in the back end of the secondary. But I still think defensively, they're going to struggle a little bit. But, his reputation is scoring points. And so if he can do that, I mean, I think they'll probably feel more comfortable in shootouts than they were a year ago. But obviously it all depends on who's the quarterback. And I think that's obviously, like you said, the biggest question going into spring.
And even though it is, the expectation is that that's going to be the Ohio transfer. No guarantees for anything. but this schedule, there has never been a schedule set up for success like this one. I mentioned the 2 non-con games to start. Then you got UCLA and the coaching change. Come back at home to play Charlotte. Then you're at home against Maryland. Then you go play Northwestern. Then you have Nebraska at home. Then you have Washington at home, who's also in the midst of a coaching change. And then you have Michigan State. So the best part of your season comes in the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9 games before it gets to Michigan, Ohio State, and Purdue. I've never seen a schedule set up like that for Indiana.
Yeah, we'll see how they handle. Obviously, this will be one of the longer road trips they've had in a long time in terms of going to the West Coast. Sometimes that can be a bit tricky, and what time that game kickoff is. 11 a.m. kickoff or something like that, or those could be rough on the West Coast. But obviously it sets up well. But they have a lot of roster decisions to make, and I think it'll be interesting to see with that schedule. Rourke is kind of like you mentioned, the Ohio transfer. Is kind of the favorite in the clubhouse in terms of experience winning that starting job. But I mean, with that kind of schedule, do you give a guy like Tyler Cherry a chance to sort of get some reps, get some work in, and he's enrolled early to sort of compete for that job. So I mean, I think Curt is going to be wanting to win now, but also with an eye for the future in terms of the quarterback battle.
Absolutely. So that's going to be very interesting and fun to look to. The spring game will go a long way in setting not expectations, but kind of keeping the excitement level for Indiana football, which that's something you don't normally see with Indiana football with the fans. I'm sure the basketball's lack of success plays into that a little bit, but Indiana fans they've hungered for a good football program for a long time. Just because they haven't been good does not mean that the desire is not there. But it's also going to be interesting to see if the fans go through a change. Do they start sticking it out instead of leaving at halftime, winning or losing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about that. I mean, I think the team has to win them over, and they have to be competitive. I think, it'll be interesting to see if basketball doesn't make the NIT or goes out early. I mean, the football is going to have sort of the spotlight on themselves for much of spring. It's starting spring camp after Indiana's spring break, which gets done, that Monday, March 18th. That's when they're going to start spring practice. So they're kind of out of the way of the Big Ten tournament, out of the way at the end of the season, the basketball season. The women will be playing, but I mean, a lot of the spotlight will be on, Curt Cignetti, and I think he wants that, and I think he's going to, try to take advantage of that, trying to, get the fan base excited, because he said he wants to remake the brand and sort of, have people forget about what they know about Indiana football. I mean, I think, the heavy lifting will be done this fall when they start winning some games, but he's going to try to convince some people in the spring that his style and his things are, the way he does things is going to be the first steps forward into doing that.
Well, there's a 3-word phrase that I use all the time: winning cures everything. And if they're winning games, I think that the excitement will continue, which it will be something to see. I mean, I was around for the Bill Mallory days, and it was fun to see Indiana fans into football. It's fun to see football because football is such an important program, and never more so than it is now, to schools in talks of realignment and the Big Ten and the SEC kind of potentially, they've not said it about pulling away, but in joining together just to have conversations and whatnot. You've always, you've got to have in the back of your mind that, hey, you've got to have a successful football program. And I don't mean you're winning Rose Bowls or whatever, but you have to be competitive if you're going to be in one of these leagues.
Well, yeah, I mean that's why Indiana, had to make a change because I mean they were over the last 3 seasons, really not even close, and so you had to do something, and they needed to kind of reverse that trend in terms of not being competitive. Forget Michigan and Ohio State. I mean, you can't be losing the games to they did to Michigan State, to the Purdue's of the world. Like those are the people that NIL. I think you're competitive against those schools, so there's not really an excuse there. Talent level wise, you're pulling in just as good of a talent, and you've done better in the transfer portal than a lot of those teams in the last 2 years. And so, I think they needed to sort of, reverse that course because they were losing too many games to the teams that they should, that they feel like they need to win to make those bowl games. Because that's where this team needs to be year in and year out. To get 6 wins.
How hard is it, do you think, to get Indiana fans? When I went to I remember going down to the Gator Bowl a few years ago when Indiana played Tennessee, and I was surprised and shocked. I was like, wow, look at this Indiana turnout. I couldn't believe it. It seemed like they were everywhere at the hotel, and I got to the field. But then once we filed into the stadium, you could see that it was 80% orange. And I'm like, oh my. Of course, that was geography played into that and whatnot. But what is it going to take for Indiana? We know they have a great following in basketball because of the history and because of the lack thereof in football. How much is it going to take to get Indiana fans to buy into that program?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have necessarily the historical perspective because I'm fairly new to the beat. But I think that once long term, I think their vision for the stadium will help. I think that does make a difference in terms of modernizing it. Because I think that Indiana's facilities sort of lag behind right now in terms of the stadium in terms of a fan perspective. And right now, I think all teams are sort of combating that it's really easy to stay at home and watch a game and be comfortable. And, you have kind of the best screens that you can, are not very expensive anymore. And so you're fighting that. And I think Indiana needs to fight that because the product on the field wasn't good. And if the stadium is not sort of that next level, how do you get fans in the stands? And so Curt Cignetti said he's going to win games. That'll help. Scott Dolson said, changes to the Memorial Stadium are coming, and they're being, sort of discussed how they want to approach everything except the end zones. And so I think that all makes a difference. And, you hope in a couple of years it all comes together, and that vision sort of aligns to sort of have bigger crowds or sellout crowds. And meaningful games late in the season, I think would help. Obviously, if you're competitive, that makes a difference.